The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 221. At his words, the woman narrowed her eyes at him. His gaze slid to a wild herb hanging on the wall. I don't want stuff like that. The woman gave a start, and she started to look at him with awe. The wild herb was, in fact, a fake. The owner had put it on display to test the visitor's eye, which further acted as a marker that decided the authenticity of the medicine sold to them. There was no one in this line of business who did not sell fake medicines. Visitors who came to purchase herbs, even those who had some knowledge of traditional medicine, would pretend to be experts and initiate bombastic discussions on the wild herb, only to unknowingly expose their foolishness. In the end, they would be cheated by the shop into buying fake medicine. Therefore, it was astounding to meet a young and handsome man well-versed enough in traditional medicine to tell apart what was genuine and false in one remark. With newfound respect for him, the woman invited him to sit down and bustled off to fulfill his demands herself. Kiran observed the elderly doctor treating patients at the door. He examined 3 patients in a row but failed to pinpoint the exact symptoms for all of them. Kiran could not help shaking his head secretly, disappointed with the declining standard of present-day doctors. An idea suddenly popped into his mind. The rise of the York family and its accumulation of wealth should not be for its own selfish gain, but for the country and the people. For the country and the people? For many years, his teacher had exhorted him to propagate traditional medicine after he descended the mountain. In that case, the York family could work to advance traditional medicine in the future. The thought made Kiran's heart swell with excitement. The York family's development finally had a direction. The Xander family could undergo transformation by moving from sales and real estate to producing traditional medicine. A penny for your thoughts, young man? You look like you're in a good mood. Having dealt with his request, the woman walked up to Kiran with a pot of fine Earl Grey tea in her hands. He smiled. I was just thinking of that man who was cleaning up the trash just now. He seemed really ill. Oh, Frank? Actually, I suspect he has tuberculosis. Annoyance flashed in the woman's eyes, and she continued, because both our last names are Dean, my name's Lana. By the way, when he showed up here for the first time to see a doctor even though he had no money, I took pity on him. I let him do the cleaning and pick up discarded herbs from time to time to treat his own illness. She wrinkled her nose. He has knowledge of medicine. Kiran was curious. A little, but he's no expert. Chronic illness turns you into somewhat of a doctor, I guess. Lana shook her head dramatically. Where does he stay? Asked Kiran. He stays by the road next to Virtuous Hall during the day and makes do in the small vestibule near the entrance at night. I'm a kind-hearted person, and since we share a last name, I thought I'd take him in. Otherwise, he'd be shivering in the streets. Lana sang her own praises. Kiran smiled and complimented her. You're a kind boss, Ms. Dean. Hee. Lana shook her head, giggling. I'm not the boss. I'm just an employee, maybe the manager at best. Well then, nice to meet you, Ms. Manager. Kiran beamed. By the way, young man, where do you want your herbs delivered to? Do you own a traditional medicine shop yourself? Thinking he was some sort of wealthy man, Lana attempted to get closer to him. Just send them to Xander Corporation. They're just for my own personal use, said Kiran. Lana was a little disappointed. Naturally, an ordinary person like her, who had no idea what was going on in the 3 big families, was unaware of Kiran's identity. The 2 of them chatted for a while more. Kiran wrote another prescription and asked Lana to prepare 7 batches. Lana was delighted to make more profit. After Kiran had given his instructions, he asked her to deliver the herbs to Xander Corporation and exited the shop. However, instead of leaving right away, he headed to the place Lana had mentioned just now. Sure enough, he spotted Frank searching for usable herbs among the discarded materials. The instant Kiran appeared, Frank stopped in his tracks and darted a sharp, wary look at him. Chapter 222. You have been stripped of your martial abilities. If you're fighting to live so you can restore them, you can forget it, Kiran told Frank, his eyes fixed on him. Clatter! The herbs that Frank had picked out fell back into the bag. His body swayed, but he planted his hands on the ground and stood up slowly, much like a wounded wolf that had been driven into a corner. Refusing to back down, he prepared himself to attack Kiran. Kiran was perfectly composed. You have a good foundation in martial arts and decent knowledge of medicine too, or you wouldn't have survived until now. But the poison has seeped too deeply into your body, leaving you only a month left to live at most. A myriad of expressions crossed Frank's face. In the end, only resignation and shock remained. He coughed. "You know martial arts medicine?" His voice was still skeptical and cold. "I can cure your illness, but recovering your martial arts may take time," Kiran replied. "Who are you?" Frank's suspicion only grew. He knew very well that the only person in this world who could cure him was his teacher, but he had died to let him escape with his life. Kiran York. Kiran York? Frank searched his memory for the name. After all, only a handful of people practiced medicine and martial arts in modern times. However, his attempt at recalling the name drew a blank. "Why are you saving me?" he asked. "Because I want you to give me your life," Kiran answered bluntly. Frank's jaw dropped. He had not expected Kiran to be so straightforward. "What? Can't bear to risk it? You should know someone's on the hunt for my life, too. Aren't you afraid?" "I'll never ask for something if I fear the consequences." Kiran resumed his solemn demeanor. Once again, Frank fell into silence. "The only thing you can do with the remaining 1 month you have is wait for death. That's how your enemies want you to end up," Kiran reminded him. "Why do you trust me?" Frank questioned again. "Because a person who endures humiliation and fights to survive has overcome their rationality and let their human nature take over. This is a person who can truly push themselves to their fullest potential." "EU." Frank gaped at the man before him. Despite his younger age, his eyes and words contained a wisdom that surpassed his own. This excited and baffled Frank at the same time. No man would wish to endure humiliation. In that case, you might as well live a heroic life. Even if you die one day, you'll have done yourself and your loved ones proud. Kiran's tone suddenly grew vehement. Instantly inspired, Frank struggled to stand up straight. "If you can save my life, I'll do 3 things for you. After that, we'll go back to being strangers." Although he was eager to get Kiran's help, he decided to draw the bottom line. "Sure," Kiran agreed readily. "How are you going to cure me?" Frank wanted to know. "Follow me." With that, Kiran strode toward his Ferrari. Frank eyed the luxurious sports car hesitantly. Was the present him worthy of sitting in a car like that? "Until those 3 things are completed, you're my brother." Kiran was already starting the engine. Touched, Frank tossed the medicinal herbs into the trash bag and ran to the car, coughing. He opened the door and got in. Kiran smiled and gave him a sincere nod. Frank felt his heart swell with the warmth of the rising sun. Kiran started the car and drove back to Xander Corporation. Before he arrived, his phone rang with an incoming call from Snow. Kiran answered it. "Yes?" "Kiran, you're turning the company building into a training ground? Are you crazy?" Snow's infuriated voice came from the other end of the phone. Kiran smiled ruefully. He told her to stay in the villa so he could use Xander Corporation more easily, but she managed to find out in the end. Chapter 223. "I'll be back at the office soon. Let's talk about this later." He hung up. Snow's eyes rolled back into her head in rage. Onyx and his gang stood nearby, too scared to say a word. Kiran accelerated and arrived at Xander Corporation in less than 10 minutes. The training facilities and equipment prepared by Onyx's gang were strewn all over the ground, while the gang hovered nervously over them. Snow was glowering with her arms folded across her chest, waiting for Kiran's explanation. On the other hand, Serena was beaming triumphantly. Kiran parked the car and got out coolly. He glanced at Onyx and his followers. "Hurry up and get everything set up." They sneaked a peek at Snow, silently expressing their fear. To Snow's displeasure, Kiran made no attempt to explain himself and even ordered the men to proceed with their preparations. What was the meaning of this? Was he ignoring her? "Kiran, what's the meaning of this?" Snow barked. "I'm building a training ground here." Kiran looked completely at ease. You suspended company operations just for this?" Snow was about to explode. "Yup," he nodded. "What makes you think you can do this?" Snow demanded furiously. "I'm the owner," Kiran responded evenly. "Owner? This company belongs to the Xander family," Snow snapped. "Didn't Grandpa say yesterday that the Xander family will cease to exist in Bayville?" "You're my wife, and Xander Corporation belongs to my family, so I can do whatever I want," Kiran went on. Kiran York. If not for the people around them, Snow would have pounced on him and torn out his flesh. He was just so insufferable. "Honk!" Another car horn blared behind them, and a vehicle carrying medicinal herbs drove through the gates. Once again, Snow was dumbfounded. "What's this for?" "To produce medicine." Kiran's tone was still nonchalant. "Kiran York, you..." Snow's eyes reddened. He was bypassing her. "The CEO..." Kiran turned to Onyx and his followers. "Divide the work among yourselves. Some of you will assemble the equipment while the others unload the medicinal herbs." Assured by his assertiveness in front of Snow, Onyx and his gang began to carry out their tasks. Kiran glanced at Frank. "Get some rest. We'll talk later." The latter inclined his head. Kiran approached Snow and took her hand. "Let's talk inside." "No!" Snow tried to shake him off, only for him to tighten his grip. Eventually, he wrapped his arms around her and half-carried, half-tugged her toward the company building. Snow wanted to scream, but her throat kept closing up, preventing her from making a sound. Onyx and his followers stared after Kiran with envy and admiration. As expected, Mr. Kiran was awesome. Even the Ice Queen was no match for him. "What a badass." Serena's grin widened. After sweeping her gaze over Frank, she trailed behind Kiran and Snow, swaying her hips as she walked. The three of them entered Snow's office. The instant Snow regained her freedom, she whipped her head around to bite Kiran. "You want to kiss me? We're not alone, you know," Kiran reminded her with a chuckle. "I won't look," Serena shouted. Snow did not stop. All she could think of was releasing her fury. "I just want to learn how to kiss," Serena added. Snow's anger was deflated at once, and she quickly halted her attack. "Well, carry on. I haven't learned anything yet?" Serena continued to tease them. If she was not Snow's best friend, the latter would have already chased her out. Kiran made his way over to the window and glanced downstairs. "Did you think the York family could rise just by depending on you, me, and Serena? We can't even guarantee the continuation of Xander Corporation's operations." At his words, Snow blanched and trembled. Chapter 224. "Mr. Kiran, what do you need me to do? Just name it," Serena chimed in. Kiran did not answer her, but shifted his attention to Snow. Snow gradually cooled off. "You want to train Onyx and his men?" Kiran nodded. "That's right. I can expand our territory, but I need you to guard the rear. Can you guard it alone?" Snow shook her head silently. Indeed, she could not. "We can give you lots of babies." Serena cracked a joke to lighten the atmosphere. Snow flushed and glared at her. Serena stuck out her tongue and glanced at Kiran merrily. "That man in your car has pretty impressive martial skills. Too bad he's dreadfully ill." "It's easy to cure an illness but not gain a person's loyalty." Kiran was slightly disappointed. Snow walked to the window and looked down. Onyx and his followers bustled about while Frank stood indifferently nearby. Catching sight of the vehicle loaded with medicinal herbs, she turned back to Kiran. "Why did you buy all those herbs?" "I'm going to need them." Choosing not to elaborate, he said to Serena, "From now on, I want you to focus on recruiting talents who have knowledge of traditional medicine." "Are you planning to transform the business?" Serena probed. Kiran nodded and turned to Snow. "While operations are suspended, I need you to expand the company's business scope to include traditional medicine manufacturing." "Traditional medicine?" Snow and Serena were taken aback. Kiran gazed downstairs. "A tree may grow up to 100 feet high, but its leaves eventually fall and rest with its roots. The York family was wiped out 20 years ago because their roots were not established." "What do you mean?" Snow asked. "When you have a little money, it belongs to yourself. When you have a lot of money, it belongs to everyone, and when you have far more than that, it belongs to the country," Kiran murmured. Snow and Serena's eyes widened in surprise. They had never thought of it that way. However, that was just the way things were. The rise of the York family requires not only manpower but also a reasonable pillar of support. Developing and promoting traditional medicine is the best direction we can take. I want the York family to become an undisputed major family in Dragon's Land in the future." Kiran's tone was vehement. A tremor ran through Snow's body like an electric shock. Wouldn't that make her the mistress of a major family? She gazed at Kiran with sparkling eyes. The next second, however, she was overcome with self-doubt. She had always thought of herself as a princess who had everything in the world. At this moment, she suddenly realized that she was nothing compared to Kiran. She did not have a grand ambition like him. Her eyes shone with a deep love for him. "Mr. Kiran, I love you so much. I'm gonna marry you and be with you for the rest of my life," Serena spoke before Snow could. Snow blushed. "Then go ahead and give birth to his babies." "I'd love to," Serena agreed, laughing. A wave of inexplicable anxiousness and jealousy welled up in Snow, along with a sudden fear of losing Kiran. Kiran scowled at Serena. "That's enough of your madness. I'm going to start brewing the medicine. In the meantime, you two should start preparing. Besides keeping this matter secret, I need you to ensure our safety over the next 2 days. Since I've promised Wolfgate that duel, more strong fighters are bound to show up. With you here, I'm not afraid," the two women said in unison. Snow turned scarlet immediately. Serena burst out laughing. "Snow, you've really fallen in love with Mr. Kiran." "Shut up!" A mortified Snow raised a hand to hit her. Serena wheeled around and ran out. "I'm not going to stick around and be a third wheel." "Enjoy your office makeout sesh." Snow stamped her foot. "What the hell are you saying?" Kiran shook his head. "Don't waste your energy getting mad at her." "I'd rather waste my energy on her than on a pig like you," Snow huffed. "Pigs are stupid. What if I don't want to be stupid?" Kiran mumbled, his expression thoughtful. "Then, don't be stupid." Snow rolled her eyes at him. "Then, let's make out in the office." He whirled around to her with a suggestive smirk on his face. Snow covered her chest in fright. "What are you trying to do, you filthy swine?" "Make out with you here," he replied. "You just gave a zealous speech and now you're already horny. Are you an animal?" "I'm a filthy swine, as you said," Kiran said teasingly. Please forgive me." Don't." Alarmed, Snow backed away with a pleading expression on her face. "Ha ha ha." Unable to hold back his mirth, Kiran guffawed before starting for the door. Realizing that she had been played, Snow removed her shoe and hurled it at him. "Go to hell. My wife's trying to kill me." Kiran dashed out of the room shouting. Her shoe struck the door with a thud. Snow clenched her fists. "You're sleeping on the floor tonight?" Her yells brought a contented smile to Kiran's face. Outside, the priority of a man was their career. At home, it was their wife's happiness. "Can't stop smiling, huh?" Serena's voice sounded next to him. "Is there something you wanted to tell me?" Kiran asked pleasantly. "Yeah, how about we have an office makeout sesh?" Serena batted her lashes at him. "Suddenly, I'm deaf." Kiran spun on his heel. "The person you brought back is from the medicine sect, the same sect the healing elder is in." Serena got down to business. "The medicine sect?" Kiran repeated, his footsteps coming to a halt. Serena did not speak. "If you use a man, don't suspect him. If you suspect a man, don't use him." With that, Kiran began to descend the stairs. "Then what about that time you spanked me?" Serena shouted after him. He stopped in embarrassment, realizing that he had slapped himself in the face. Hadn't he spanked Serena in anger precisely because he had suspected her? He glanced over his shoulder at her. Anything except sleeping together. Serena's eyes lit up. Anything? Thinking of everything Serena had done for the York family and himself, Kiran nodded. "Just name it." "Then," she squirmed hesitantly. Kiran was startled. This did not seem like the Serena he knew. He smiled. "I'll leave you to think about it. I need to head downstairs now." "Can you spank me again?" Serena seemed to have mustered up all her courage to blurt out the question. Kiran was flabbergasted. This was too tall of an order for him. Most importantly, it was too perverted. "I like it." Serena's usual flirtatious behavior returned. With a murmur, she blushed and ran away like an innocent girl. Kiran felt as if he had been struck by lightning. What a crazy world he lived in. What a crazy woman Serena Zimmerman was. No, she was completely deranged. A chill traveled down Kiran's spine, and he raced downstairs in apprehension. Spanking her was the last thing he wanted to do. What if she got addicted to it? Downstairs, Onyx and his men had completed their preparations. When Kiran appeared, they fell in line and waited for his instructions. Chapter 225. Kiran's fiery gaze swept over their faces like a general assessing his soldiers, his eyes sharp and authoritative. Under his scrutiny, everyone straightened up, and their expressions grew more determined. Even if a sea of flames barred their way right now, they would face it head-on without fear. Satisfied with what he saw, Kiran announced, Your training is about to start. Before that, I would like to stress 4 things. Whoosh. Everyone stood straighter, their faces solemn. First, all of you here are my brothers and part of the York family. Yes, Mr. Kiran. Onyx was the first to cry out. Yes, Mr. Kiran. The group instantly erupted in deafening shouts. Passion etched in his features, Kiran continued. Second, you won't be helping me to do evil, but to give back to society better. Give back to society? Everyone chorused, their cries reverberating throughout the company building. Onyx's eyes glistened with tears. The reason the 3 big families had supported him in the first place was to make him their minion and assist them in their affairs. To be precise, they wanted him to do their dirty work. Kiran, in contrast, was asking them to give back to society. It was clear who was nobler among them. This was the York family. This was a real ruler. Third, I'll make a batch of medicines to enhance body functions, but only the strongest among you can take these medicines. Ew. All eyes slid to the mountain of herbs. How was he going to refine them into medicine? Their hearts soared with anticipation. If Kiran could make medicine, wouldn't that make him a genius? Even Frank could not contain his astonishment from showing on his face. Although he had knowledge of medicine, producing it was a whole different story. Kiran added, Tomorrow, I'll conduct a training assessment on you. At the end of the assessment, 18 outstanding people will be selected to take the pill I make. At his words, everyone's eyes lit up with joy and expectation. However, he did not elaborate further. Instead, his expression sobered. Now, I'm going to tell you my 4th request. I want all of you to remember this clearly. Everyone kept their worshipful and earnest gazes on him. Stay united, care for your brothers, and love your country. Kiran finished and regarded them intently. I want you to remember these words very carefully. This is my fundamental purpose of training you. Anyone who thinks they cannot do it may leave now. Onyx's heart pounded in his chest as he gazed fervently at Kiran with moist eyes. Stay united, just like how Margaret had given up her son's life in exchange for Kiran's. Care for one's brothers, just like how the Xander family stayed in Bayville for 20 years and guarded Dragon's Mount for the York family. What moved Onyx the most was Kiran's command to love the country. Without a country, how could there be a home? Although sacrificing one's life to protect the nation was not needed in peacetime. How could one have a home that nurtured noble values if one did not care about their motherland? The York family had been forgotten and scorned for 20 years, but there were still people who remained faithful to it. This was their loyalty to the York family. Where did their loyalty come from? None other than family values. Kiran York, their master, had accurately got to the crux of the matter. In contrast, the 3 big families, despite their prominence, were fragmented due to internal betrayal. It was precisely because they had failed to nurture noble family values. Onyx was bursting with pride. Yes, sir. His response ignited everyone's enthusiasm. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Their roars were thunderous enough to pierce the heavens. Frank's frail body shook with shock and emotion. Snow had been watching from the window upstairs all this time and heard Kiran's entire speech. She stowed his words away in her heart, her eyes teary with emotion. Chapter 226. She raised a hand to wipe her eyes and murmured, Idiot, you're putting so much pressure on me, the future mistress of your family. Pa! She refused to be his mistress. She would be his queen. The wind's making me tear up, Snow mumbled to herself like an adorable little girl. If Kiran knew about her reaction, he would definitely embrace her in his arms. At that moment, he had already commenced training for Onyx and his followers. The training facilities and equipment had been set up based on his own training methods on the mountain. Although it was impossible for these people to undergo systematic training like he did, they could still improve rapidly. Despite their passion, once training had begun, it was obvious that a lot of them could not stand the intensity. After all, most of them used to live comfortable lives as debt collectors. Being suddenly subjected to such training would naturally be too much for them. Kiran did not eliminate them. He allowed them to choose their own future. As for character, he believed it could be cultivated now that he had laid out his 4 requirements. Of course, he was aware that there would be some whose character was not up to standard and would eventually have to be filtered out. However, he had not expected the filtering process to take place so quickly and violently. After everything was settled, he turned to Frank. Let's go in a room. I'll cure your illness. Frank had witnessed the whole process. Even though he could not understand Kiran's mind, he had begun to respect him. Kiran grabbed the 7 packages of medicine that Lana had prepared for him and strode into the company building. He found an office on the first floor and went inside. He put the medicines on the desk and motioned for Frank to sit. Instead of sitting down, Frank eyed Kiran skeptically. Are you really sure you can cure me? The person who wounded you kept you alive on purpose. At the same time, he poisoned you so you'd be unable to heal your own injuries. In this way, the poison slowly invaded your body, weakening you and bringing you closer to death, Kiran said coolly. Although Frank had followed Kiran here and even watched him train Onyx's gang, he was still mistrustful of him. Nevertheless, he was utterly astounded by Kiran's words. The latter described the symptoms so clearly that it was as if he had witnessed the entire attack. It will take 7 days for me to treat you with 7 doses of medicine. Kiran pointed at the medicines he had brought in. Once again, Frank stared at him in amazement. How did you buy my medicine in advance? After meeting each other, they returned to Xander Corporation right away. So where did these medicines come from? The manager, Lana, told me about you. That's how I prepared your medicine. Kiran looked at Frank gently. Since you've already fought so hard to live, won't you trust me and give me a chance? Frank pondered for a moment, then glanced at him. My enemies are very powerful, and they're experts in using poison. Aren't you afraid? Aren't you going to get back at them once you're cured? Kiran responded with another question. What if I die before completing those 3 things I promised you? Frank wanted to know. It's like bearing a child. No one can guarantee the future. The mother may give birth to a person with great ambition like me, or she may give birth to a prodigal. But she can't not give birth just because the future is unknown, right? Kiran asked rhetorically. Frank was taken aback by his mindset. This young man in front of him was a total mystery to him. If you don't have the courage to choose life, then why bother? Kiran added. Chapter 227. Thump! Frank suddenly dropped to his knees before Kiran. Kiran arched an eyebrow in surprise but continued to look at him without saying a word. If you cure me, and I fail to complete 3 things for you, consider this kneeling as a show of my gratitude to you. If I live, I'll keep my word, Frank declared resolutely. Kiran was impressed. Frank was a real man. However, he merely looked out the window, his gaze landing on Onyx and his men, who were training with all their might. I, Kiran York, can lay down my life for my brothers. Frank's body shook slightly. He had never thought Kiran would regard him as a brother. In the end, he only stood up and looked at Kiran wordlessly. Kiran was a little dismayed that he had not managed to move Frank. He had been longing to recruit him since learning from Serena that he was from the School of Medicine, but Frank still refused to declare his stance despite his efforts. Nevertheless, he chose not to dwell on it and took out a silver needle. I'll unclog your blood vessels for 3 days, detoxify your body for the next 3 days, and let you heal on your own on the last day. Frank nodded hopefully. Whatever you say. Kiran inclined his head, and a dozen more silver needles appeared in his hand. Before Frank could ask him for instructions, something flashed before his eyes. The silver needles flew from Kiran's hand and landed accurately on Frank's pressure points in a burst of white light. Frank was stunned. Kiran's medical skills were far superior to his. In the next second, all he could perceive was the white silhouette of Kiran's figure circling his body. The silver needles began to move in and out of his pressure points. Warmth flowed into him, soothing his injured blood vessels like rain after a long drought. Half an hour later, Kiran stopped and removed the silver needles. Frank felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from his body, and he felt stronger too. He whirled around to Kiran joyfully. To his amazement, the latter looked completely unfazed, his breathing as steady as ever. Wizard. A true wizard. Frank had always considered himself a medical expert, but Kiran's skills were far more remarkable than he had ever imagined. His eyes widened in shock and awe. Seemingly oblivious to his reaction, Kiran picked up a package of herbs and tossed it to him. I requested Lana to prepare the apparatus for refining the herbs. You can just make the medicine yourself later. Frank caught it and lowered his head to smell it. Here's the prescription. Kiran handed a piece of paper to him. Frank was flabbergasted. To traditional medicine practitioners, prescriptions were invaluable treasures they would never sell, regardless of the price. They were the practitioner's source of money, but Kiran was offering one to him right now. He did not accept it, but his respect for Kiran was growing. You can study it yourself. Just think of it as self-learning. With a flick of Kiran's wrist, the prescription fell into Frank's hand. Frank gave a start and gazed at him deferentially. Well, why do you trust me so much? A person will only understand the pain of struggling to live when they've experienced it themselves, Kiran murmured. Although his teacher had been kind to him, without his parents' love, he had only been living without purpose. How often had he cried late at night, huddled in bed and trembling in fear of thunder? How often had he shed tears because of his training, yet persisted despite his wounds and fatigue? In the past, he had ignorantly resented his teacher for being cruel. Now he only looked back on those miserable bygone days with a woeful heart. A person will only understand the pain of struggling to live when they've experienced it themselves, Frank repeated, his face twisted with grief. Chapter 228. Ring! Just then, Kiran's phone rang with a call from Yvonne, and he answered it. Are you done acquiring Blooming Group? Marshall won't sell. Yvonne sounded disgruntled. Where are you? Kiran demanded in annoyance. I'm in front of the building. Marshall drove me out, she replied in frustration. Wait for me. Kiran cut the call. He glanced at the medicinal herbs outside, then turned back to Frank and fished out a prescription. I want to make a strength pill, but I don't have time now. Follow this prescription and refine the herbs for me first. I'll do the rest myself when I get back. You trust me? Frank was absolutely dumbstruck. It was already unbelievable that Kiran had given him the prescription to treat his illness. Now, he was bestowing on him a prescription for the strength pill. Did Kiran trust him so much? Since I've recruited you, I won't doubt you. Kiran spun on his heel and left. Clutching the two prescription lists, Frank stared after him with emotions swirling in his eyes. Eventually, he clenched his fists and vowed to himself that if he could get his revenge and come back alive, he would offer his life to Kiran. In his eyes, Kiran was an upright and broad-minded man. Kiran had treated Frank with nothing but sincerity. He needed talented people, and Frank was one of them. Winning the latter over with sincerity had been more effective than expected. Kiran made his way to Blooming Group. In the car, he dialed Starley's number. She picked up enthusiastically and greeted him in a sickeningly sweet voice. Mr. Kiran, I thought you'd forgotten about me. Her tone carried a tinge of mournfulness, as if she was an innocent girl waiting for love. Kiran went straight to the point. Has Blooming Group compensated you and the other customers? Yup. I think they paid everyone a pretty hefty amount. Realizing that he intended to talk business, Starley answered seriously. Kiran was surprised. Wasn't Blooming Group already bankrupt? By the way, Mr. Kiran, it seems that they've modified Blooming Cream after recalling it, and they'll be relaunching it soon, Starley continued. Relaunching? Kiran exclaimed. Yes, apparently they found a solution, Starley supplied. Kiran was startled. I'll need you to collect information on that for me. Then shall I go see you? A delighted Starley asked eagerly. I'll call you later. Send the info to me once you get it. Kiran hung up. Starley clenched her fists in excitement, her eyes shining. Kiran hurried to Blooming Group, anxious to find out the source of Marshall's confidence. At Blooming Group's entrance, Yvonne hovered beside her Maserati, looking around anxiously as she waited for Kiran to arrive. The sight of her dressed in a snow-white down jacket on a hot summer day was rather bizarre. Her bloodless face was as white as a sheet, whiter than the lightest shade of foundation, which only made her more enchanting. Screech! There was a sudden screeching of brakes, and a car skidded to a stop beside her. Alarmed, she backed away and almost tripped over her own feet. Ha ha! Too bad you didn't die of fright on the spot, a smug voice spoke. It was Lily, Marshall's girlfriend. Yvonne glanced at her, frowning. Lily opened the door and exited the car, smiling cruelly at Yvonne. Here to acquire the company for your pretty boy again, Miss Quinn? Piffed! I can't believe the Quinn family's daughter is serving as a pretty boy's mistress. What's worse, your family's already close to being wiped out, yet you're still busy kissing his ass. You really amaze me. Lily's features were contorted with derision. Regaining her composure, Yvonne straightened up and stared at Lily coldly. Please watch what you say. Watch what I say? Snickering, Lily strode up to Yvonne. Smash! slapped her without hesitation. Chapter 229. Ah! The impact threw Yvonne's frail body off balance. She hit the car with a thud and cried out in pain. Lily's arrogance swelled. She gave her another slap, then another with the back of her hand. "This is not how you be a mistress." "Ack!" Yvonne screamed again. Lily applied more force this time, sending her sickly body crashing against the car with a force enough to break her bones. Growing frenzied, Lily grabbed Yvonne's hair. Smack! Kiran York's lapdog. Slap! Gah! Yvonne's shrieks of anguish rang out. Her whole body swayed from side to side like a willow in the wind, each slap threatening to knock her out cold. As the Quinn family's prized daughter, she had never suffered such a beating because she had been ill since childhood. Not only was she unable to resist, but the attacks also exacerbated her condition by elevating her stress. The security guards at the gates did not attempt to defuse the situation. In fact, they applauded excitedly and even called Marshall. Marshall was overjoyed by the news. He loathed the Quinn family for betraying his trust. Now that the Quinn family had been trampled under Kiran's foot, he was no longer scared of them, and so he dashed downstairs to join in the chaos. To cheer up his employees, he called all of them to come and watch. Emboldened by the growing crowd, Lily channeled all her viciousness into her strikes. Poor Yvonne was knocked to the ground, and she could only roll back and forth helplessly. Marshall and his staff clapped wildly, reveling in her agony. They seemed to treat her like a heroine, greatly satisfying her vanity. She put her hands on her hips. "Why don't you call Kiran now? Let him come!" Despite Yvonne's sorry state, she refused to back down. She did not shed a single tear, and she had even stopped screaming. Marshall sneered. "Kiran wants the whole Quinn family dead. He's just toying with her." "Who said that?" Kiran's icy voice cut in abruptly. When Blooming Group's employees heard his voice, fear instinctively kicked in, and they moved away one after another. Kiran glanced at their cheering faces with hatred and bewilderment. These employees were supposed to resign following the Blooming Cream issue, but why were they still here? Was Marshall that powerful, or was the Simmons family harboring some secret? He glanced at Lily and, to his bafflement, found that her skin's health had been restored. Marshall was alarmed by Kiran's appearance for a moment before he quickly straightened up. Lily's lip curled. "Kiran, I'm helping you beat up a member of the Quinn family. How do you plan to thank me?" At the sound of Kiran's voice, Yvonne's grievances welled up in her like a tide. She was like a small boat lost at sea that had finally found the shore. However, her heart sank when Lily mentioned the hatred between the Quinn family and Kiran. She could not help but glance at him, wondering what he would say. "Thank you?" Kiran sauntered over to her. Lily remained composed. "That's right. You should thank me for helping you teach this Quinn girl a lesson." Smack. Kiran's palm landed directly on her face. "How dare you lay your hands on my woman?" Spurt. Lily spat out a mouthful of blood with a piercing yowl, her body whirling around like a spinning top. Kiran bent down and pulled Yvonne to her feet. He cupped her swollen cheeks with both hands, much like a caress, and injected a sliver of his internal force into her. At once, the burning pain on her face dissipated and cooled. Yvonne's heart was on fire. How dare you lay your hands on my woman? Did she hear him correctly? Did he actually say that? Did he really think of her as his woman? Yvonne felt like a pampered princess, and all her indignation was instantly washed away by bliss. Kiran tidied up her disheveled hair and smoothed down her jacket, brushing the dust off her. His gentle and intimate actions almost melted Yvonne's heart. Chapter 230. She had not shed any tears even when she had been beaten violently and accused of being his mistress, but at this moment, her tears spilled from her eyes. "Kiran York, how dare you hit me?" Having collected herself from the impact of the slap, Lily screeched at him. The veins on Marshall's forehead bulged as he glowered at Kiran with ever-growing animosity. "This is assault, Kiran York. I'm going to call the police." "Call the police?" "Sure." Kiran was not at all afraid. Yvonne cast Marshall a frosty look. "Lily hit me first, so go ahead and call the police. Did you think the Quinn family would be scared of you?" "You!" Marshall was at a loss for words. If he called the police, the Quinn family would have the upper hand. Enraged and embarrassed by Marshall's cowardice and lack of manliness, Lily fixed her blazing eyes on Kiran. Kill me if you dare. Her fingers curled to form the shape of claws, and she lunged forward to scratch his face. Watch out! Yvonne shouted a warning, and instinctively rushed over to shield him with her delicate body. Kiran was faster. He seized Lily's wrists. Say goodbye to your hands? Snap! With a sickening crack, Lily's wrists twisted back at a 90-degree angle before drooping limply. Although she had not felt anything yet, just the visual effect was enough to fill her with fear. The next second, excruciating pain flooded her senses. She doubled over in agony, her facial features contorting. Marshall staggered back in horror. A shocked Yvonne leaned into Kiran's arms, though the safety of his embrace made her heart flutter with happiness. How dare you hurt her? Marshall rounded on Kiran furiously. She's already hurt, isn't she? Kiran jabbed a finger at Lily coolly. Marshall's mouth opened and closed, but he could not find words. Honey, you've got to get revenge for me, Lily wailed. Marshall's face was ashen, but he did not dare retaliate. Kiran's strength was just too formidable. Attempting to fight him would be throwing straws against the wind. The Blooming Group's employees retreated hastily, their eyes wide with terror. Lily's heart was filled with despair. Kiran glanced at the company building. Marshall, you're not going to sell your company, are you? Reminded of the purpose of Yvonne's visit, Marshall fumed. You tried to acquire my business forcefully and even committed violence. Have you no respect for the law? Ha, Kiran snickered. What are you laughing at? Marshall was triggered by his mocking laugh. You bully the weak with your wealth and counter the strong with the law. Is this your logic? As Kiran spoke, he started moving toward Marshall. Gee, get away from me! Marshall backed away in fear. Your woman asked you to get revenge for her. How will you do that if I don't get close to you? Kiran taunted. Marshall only backpedaled faster. Get revenge? No way! If he laid a finger on Kiran, he would lose his life. Kiran halted his steps and glanced at the miserable Lily. Marshall's already so scared. What are you going to do? Lily was in both physical and mental anguish. The thought of being disabled for life was just too much to bear. When she saw Marshall retreating like a coward, she exploded with rage. Marshall Simmons, are you even a man? Marshall ignored her pointedly. All he cared about was his own safety. Lily was dismayed. Compared with Kiran, who had protected Yvonne and broken her hands, Marshall was a chicken. Marshall Simmons, if it weren't for your father, your family and Blooming Group would have been screwed. You're a wimp, a loser, a scumbag. A variety of emotions flashed across Marshall's face. Still, he did not move from his spot. Even under the gazes of his staff, he chose to turn a blind eye. At this moment, nothing mattered to him more than staying alive. The mention of his father and Lily's insults piqued Kiran's interest. Does the Simmons family rely on Marshall's father for support?